Field Journal of Eleanor Whitmore, British Columbia, 1891. I had intended to spend only a few hours away from the lodge. William had gone north with the hunting party that morning. I had watched them disappear between the trees, laughing and calling to one another, as though the wilderness had never given a man a reason to be cautious. I decided to take the Western Trail. It was not the trail William had recommended. That was probably my first mistake. I had been told the Western Trail followed a small creek before turning back toward the lodge. It seemed harmless enough. The morning was clear, the snow was light, and the mountains were beautiful. I carried a small pack with food, water, matches, and my journal. William's walking stick was in my hand. He had carved it himself. He would later remind me of that fact several times. At the time, I thought it was simply a useful walking stick. I had no idea how useful it would become. The forest was quiet that morning, not silent. There is a difference. There were birds in the trees, water moving somewhere beneath the snow, the occasional crack of a branch in the distance. I walked for nearly 2 hours before I realized I had gone farther than I intended. The trail had become little more than a narrow path through the trees. I should have turned around. Instead, I continued. I remember thinking that I would see something interesting if I went just a little farther. I did. I saw the bear. At first, I noticed movement between the trees. Then I saw her clearly. A large black bear stood perhaps 30 yards away. There were 2 cubs behind her. I stopped immediately. She had not seen me. At least, I don't believe she had. I remember thinking that if I remained still, she might simply leave. She lifted her head. She saw me. Everything happened very quickly after that. The bear charged. I turned and ran. I did not run gracefully. I did not run intelligently. I ran. Branches struck my face. Snow slipped beneath my boots. I could hear the bear behind me. I remember thinking that William would never let me hear the end of this. Then my foot caught something. I fell backward. For one terrible moment, I thought the bear had reached me. But the pain came from beneath my leg. A trap, an old iron trap had closed around my boot. I screamed. The bear was still coming. I pulled at my leg. The trap would not move. I could hear the bear getting closer. Then she was on me. I fell onto my back. The bear struck at me and I tried to cover my face. My backpack took the first blow. The straps snapped. The bear tore into it. I could feel the weight of her against me. I tried to push her away. She caught my right arm. Her teeth closed around it. There was an instant of pressure, then pain, a terrible, crushing pain. I screamed, and then I heard the cubs. They were calling from somewhere behind her. The bear lifted her head. She released my arm. She looked toward the sound. For a moment, she remained over me. Then she turned away. She walked toward the cubs. I watched her disappear between the trees. I could not move. I lay there staring at the sky, trying to understand why I was still alive. My right arm was bleeding badly. My leg was still caught in the trap, and the bear was somewhere nearby. I began to laugh. I don't know why. Perhaps it was shock. Perhaps it was the absurdity of the situation. I had gone for a walk. Now I was lying in the snow with a bear bite in my arm and an iron trap around my boot. It did not seem like a very promising afternoon. The trap was old. Rust covered the chain, and the jaws had closed unevenly. That may have been the only reason I still had a leg. I tried forcing the jaws apart with my hands. They didn't move. I tried using William's walking stick as a lever. The wood slipped. The trap snapped tighter. I screamed. For several minutes, I did nothing. I simply lay there and cried. Then I became angry. At the trap, at the bear, at William, and most of all, at myself. I wedged the walking stick between the jaws again. This time, I placed a stone beneath it. I pushed down with my good arm. Nothing happened. I pushed harder. The wood bent. The jaws opened slightly. I pulled my leg. My boot caught. I pushed again. The walking stick cracked, but the gap widened. I dragged my leg free. The trap slammed shut behind me. I rolled onto my back and stared at the sky. William's walking stick was broken. Under normal circumstances, I would have been concerned. These were not normal circumstances. I removed what remained of my boot. The trap had cut my lower leg. My ankle was worse, but I could move my toes. Again, that seemed important. I cleaned the wound with a little water from the damp moss and wrapped it with the remaining cloth. It wasn't good medicine. It was simply what I had. By then, the light had begun to change. I needed to move. The lodge was somewhere south. The problem was that the bear and her cubs were also somewhere south. I chose west. I told myself I'd find the creek. The creek joined the river. The river passed near the lodge. It was a plan. Not an especially good plan, but it was a plan. I moved by crawling, dragging my injured leg behind me. Sometimes I used the broken walking stick. Sometimes I pulled myself from tree to tree. Progress was painfully slow. After nearly an hour, I heard running water. I found the creek at the bottom of a narrow ravine. The bank was steep. I lowered myself carefully. Halfway down, the wet soil gave way. I slid the rest of the distance and landed in the water. The cold shocked the breath out of me. My backpack slipped from my shoulder. I grabbed it before the current could take it. Then I tried to stand. I couldn't. The water reached my waist. My injured leg dragged along the stones. I pulled myself toward the bank. Every time I gained a few inches, the current pushed me back. My hands went numb. I dug my fingers into a tree root and held on. For a moment, I thought I might remain there until I froze. Then I used the backpack strap. I looped it around the root. I pulled myself forward until my chest reached the mud. Then I crawled out of the creek. I lay there shaking. My clothes were soaked. My matches were wet. The sun was going down. I opened my backpack. My journal was ruined. The pages had swollen together. The food was wet, but still edible. The compass was missing. I searched the bank. Nothing. I had lost the one thing that could tell me whether I was moving toward the lodge or farther away. I ate half the food. Then I heard the bear. It was on the opposite bank. The mother stood among the trees. One cub climbed onto a log behind her. I stared at them. The bear stared back. I had crossed the creek, but I had not escaped her. She began moving downstream. So did I. For the next hour, I followed the creek while the bear moved through the forest on the other side. Sometimes I could see her. Sometimes I could only hear her. She never crossed, but she never seemed to leave. The temperature dropped quickly. My wet clothes clung to me. My hands shook so badly that I could barely grip the broken walking stick. When the light was almost gone, I found a fallen cedar with a hollow beneath its roots. It wasn't comfortable, but it was dry enough to keep the rain off my face. I crawled beneath it. I removed the wet outer layer of my coat. Then I pressed cloth against the bite on my arm. The bleeding had slowed. The pain had not. I tried using the matches. The first one broke, the second sparked and died, the third caught. I held it beneath a curl of dry bark. A tiny flame appeared. I fed it slowly. Twigs, dry moss, more bark. The fire grew no larger than a dinner plate, but it was enough. I sat beside it with my knees pulled against my chest. For the first time that day, I allowed myself to think about William. He would return to the lodge the following afternoon. He would find it empty. He would see that his walking stick was gone. He would know exactly what I'd done. That part was almost worse than the bear. Night settled over the forest. The fire burned low. I heard movement across the creek. The bear was still there. Once I saw her shape between the trees. She walked along the bank and disappeared into the darkness. I stayed awake for hours. Every sound became an animal. Every shadow became the bear. My ankle throbbed. My arm burned. I was so cold that my teeth hurt from chattering. At some point, I began talking to myself. I listed everything I could see. Tree roots, fire, wet coat, backpack, broken stick. I named each object to remind myself that I was still awake, still thinking, still alive. The morning came slowly. The fire was dead. The rain had stopped, but mist covered the creek. I tried to stand. My injured leg would not straighten, so I crawled. I followed the creek downstream because it was the only landmark I had left. The bear appeared again shortly after sunrise. This time she was on my side of the water. I saw her behind me, following the trail I'd made through the mud. The cubs were not visible. I stayed still. The bear lifted her nose. Then she moved toward me. I backed away on my hands and one knee. She came faster. I turned and crawled. The creek narrowed ahead. A fallen tree stretched from one bank to the other. I pulled myself onto it. The bear ran toward me. I dragged my injured leg across the trunk. The water rushed beneath me. Halfway across, my skirt caught on a broken branch. I pulled. The fabric held. The bear reached the end of the tree. I could hear its claws against the bark. I used my knife to cut through the skirt. The fabric tore loose. I fell onto the opposite bank. The bear stepped onto the trunk. Then the cubs called from behind her. She stopped. She looked toward them, then back at me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Finally, she climbed down and returned to the cubs. I kept crawling. I didn't stop until the creek curved and the bear disappeared from view. By midday, I had no food left. I drank from the creek. I no longer cared what might be living in the water. My injured arm had become stiff. Redness had spread around the bite. I felt warm despite the cold air. I knew enough to understand that this was not encouraging. Then I heard something that didn't belong to the forest. Metal striking metal. I stopped. The sound came again. Farther downstream. A wagon. I crawled toward it. The creek opened into a wider river. Across the water, I saw a dirt road. A wagon moved between the trees. I shouted. My voice came out weak. The wagon continued. I shouted again. Nothing. I picked up a stone and struck it against the metal buckle on my backpack. Once, twice, again. The wagon stopped. A man climbed down. I waved the torn remains of my coat. He saw me. I don't remember crossing the river. I later learned that the men used a rope to reach me. I remember hands lifting me. Someone said I was safe. I remember asking them to watch for the bear. Then everything went dark. When I woke, I was back at the lodge. William was sitting beside the bed. He looked as though he hadn't slept. For once, he had nothing to say. I tried to smile. It hurt. He took my hand carefully. "You're safe." I nodded. Then I remembered the walking stick. I broke it. William stared at me. Eleanor. It was a very useful stick. He lowered his head. For a moment, I thought he was angry. Then I realized he was laughing. Or crying. Possibly both. I recovered slowly. The wounds in my arm became infected, but the doctor reached the lodge in time. My ankle was not broken. The trap had missed the bone. William called that fortunate. I did not feel fortunate. He asked me why I'd left the Western Trail. I told him I'd seen an interesting plant. That was true. It was not a particularly good reason. He informed me that I was never to walk alone again. I agreed. At the time, I meant it. Mostly. The bear was never killed. William found tracks near the creek, along with prints from 2 cubs. He believed the mother had remained close because I kept moving through the same narrow section of territory between her feeding ground and the cubs. She had not hunted me. She had not followed me out of cruelty. I was simply injured, slow, and repeatedly in the wrong place. I found this explanation reasonable. I still disliked her. My original journal was destroyed by the creek, so I wrote this account from memory. William read it once. He said I'd made the entire experience sound amusing. I told him some parts were amusing, just not while they were happening. At the bottom of my original notes, I had written one final sentence. The Northern Trail did contain an unusual species of orchid. I regret that I was unable to bring back a specimen. William does not.